Hi, I'm Gary Bembridge, and this is another of my tips for travelers. In this episode, we're going to learn about cruising Greece and the Greek islands, and I'm going to share with you 9 tips to make the most of any cruise vacation around this magnificent part of the world. First of all, why on earth should you actually go? It has something for pretty much everybody. They are very beautiful, and all of the islands have unique characters and stories and landscapes. Secondly, they have magnificent beaches. Some of the islands have some of the best beaches in the world. So if you're a beach lover, you're going to love cruising the Greek islands. Thirdly, if you're a history buff like me, you're going to love Greece. It's a cradle of civilization, both on the mainland stops and on the islands. You're going to come across some magnificent historical and archaeological sites. Fourthly, if you're into shopping, there's remarkable amounts of local produce like olive oil and different foods that you can buy, but also there's a great range of crafts. So when is the best time to go? So the season really runs from May to late October. July and August are the most popular times. The islands and Greece can be absolutely packed, and also it can be very, very hot with temperatures up to the late 30s Celsius, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In my view, the best times to go are actually in June and September or into early October. It's before and after the real madness of the season, but everything's open, the weather's still great. My third tip is around what is the best itinerary. There are 3 broad types of itineraries. The first of these is the Eastern Mediterranean. Many of them start in either Venice or they start in Athens, and they'll often cruise down to Greece or from Greece, stopping in also at some places along the Adriatic like Dubrovnik, or they'll call into places like Kotor in Montenegro. They then also include, of course, a number of stops at some mainland parts of Greece and on a number of the islands. They do tend to focus on the bigger and more popular islands. The second cruise you can choose is a Greek islands only cruise. Now these tend to be operated by Greek owned cruise lines, tend to be much smaller ships, and they will just go around a number of islands. The third type of cruise, which used to be very big, is much less big now because of lots of the issues with Turkey. But there used to be combined Greece and Turkey cruises, and many of these would then include a couple of stops at the Greek islands and go to some of the key sites in Turkey. Also, some of the cruises would then go on to places like Israel. However, there's much less cruise lines that do this itinerary now because of many of the issues at certainly the time of recording with Turkey. Personally, I really like the Eastern Mediterranean or the Adriatic cruise because you get a great chance to see some of the parts of the Adriatic like Montenegro and Serbia, but you also get to spend time in the Greek islands. And of course, you see the 2 iconic cities of Venice, which is a magnificent city, and Athens, which is another magnificent city. Many of the cruises will focus on the big islands, so they'll just go to things like Mykonos, Santorini, and perhaps Crete. Look at itineraries and cruises that include the following. These are, for me, the must-see places to go. Santorini is a real must on an itinerary. The area of Santorini is really created by massive volcanic activity. So it's now a big caldera, as you have big 300-meter high cliffs and the towns perched on top of the cliffs. Secondly, of course, you want to go to Mykonos. It was very trendy and very hip in the 70s and 80s. After a period of decline, it's really back in vogue. Also very important are visiting places with huge historical significance. So obviously Athens, so make sure if you're embarking or disembarking your cruise in Athens that you do spend time in Athens and go visit the Acropolis, which is on a big outcrop overlooking the city, and also make sure you go and visit the new Acropolis Museum. Also make sure that you are going to Katakolon on your cruise and head out to Olympia, which is the site where the original Olympic Games were held and still has a link to the Olympic Games of today because the flame is created there for each of the Olympic Games. I recommend that you ensure that Crete is on your itinerary and you'll head out to the incredible Palace of Knossos. This was the center of the Minoan culture and, of course, is famous for the Minotaur, which allegedly lived underneath it in the labyrinth, which was a half man, half beast. Other key places to go and visit is Patmos. It's a very beautiful island. Not many cruises go there. You have the monastery of St. John. Then you have the famous cave where Jesus appeared to John and encouraged him to write the book of Revelations, which is the last book in the New Testament. Another great island which I'd recommend you look for on the itinerary is called Githyon. This is a very small island and it has a beautiful little town, and also you can head out to the Glyfada caves and you can go on a boat trip which lasts about half an hour, weaving your way through this magnificent complex. Another island which a lot of cruisers will call on is Corfu. Corfu is great more if you want to go and have a beach type of scene. So those are my tips around the places and islands to look for. Make sure that you don't just go to the obvious islands and that your itinerary does include some of those more unusual places. So look at the itinerary and places you want to go to first and then decide the cruise line. Now the good news is that pretty much every major cruise line visits Greece either for the whole season or certainly part of the season. So probably any cruise line that you want to cruise with is probably going to go to Greece and the Greek islands at some point during the year. First of all, you could choose to go on one of the major cruise lines which operate bigger ships, and you'll find they all go there. So whether it's Princess, Holland America, Celebrity, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, all those cruise lines will include Greece at some point during the year. So if you like to go on a ship with lots of facilities, then definitely do that. However, bear in mind, you're going to be on a ship with lots of people. So some of these islands are quite small and can get really packed and really busy with the big ships in. Secondly, which is my personal preference, is to go on a smaller ship cruise line. So for example, my most recent cruise around the Greek islands was with Azamara Club Cruises, but I've also done it with Windstar Cruises. So on cruise lines which have much smaller ships. Advantage of those is they're much more likely to go to some of those smaller and out of the way places because they have much smaller ships. The third thing you can do if you want a real Greek experience is to go with one of the Greek cruise lines. So for example, the Celestial Cruises, which does lots of Greece and Turkey cruises, and there's another cruise line called Variety, which are much smaller ships, and they'll do much more going around just the Greek islands, as I'd spoken about earlier. My next step is around what to do once you get to the islands. The simplest thing to do, of course, is to do excursions with your cruise line. The advantage of that is that cruise lines will always guarantee if their own excursions are delayed, the ship will wait for you. The second thing you do is go through independent providers, which will offer very similar tours, often for a lower cost. The other thing which I like to do is self-touring. You'll find many cruise lines will offer lots of resources. So for example, on the Azamara cruise that I was on, they gave us talks, they gave us port guides, and also someone from the tourist board would come on board the ship when it docked and provide maps and other advice. Most of the islands that you call on will have either a hop-on, hop-off bus tour, which will normally leave from the port, or some of them will also have, for example, in Santorini, there was a boat service and that would shuttle you to other parts of the island. Certainly when you get off in all of the islands, you'll find either taxis or providers there ready to provide independent touring. So my next tip is around things to watch out for and be aware of. 4 things I really want to draw to your attention. First of all, bear in mind it can get really, really hot. So if you're going in the peak times of July and August especially, bear in mind it will get very, very hot and sticky. So make sure that you come prepared for that. Make sure you've got sunscreen, hats, and lots of water. The second thing is be ready for crowds. In the peak season, it's manically busy, but even in the off season, places can be very busy. So one of the things I recommend you do is if you want to go to the big famous sites, whether it's Olympia or Palace of Knossos, is try and plan your day to get there really early so you miss that kind of peak around midday time. The third thing is be ready to use tenders. So many of the ships will have to dock not on land, they'll have to dock out in the harbour and use the tender boats. Bear in mind that you'd like to have a lot of tendering. So one of the advantages again of booking a cruise line excursion is often they will give you priority on the tenders. The fourth thing to bear in mind is, of course, you're in Greece, and Greek is going to be spoken everywhere, but you'll find in all of the destinations you go to in the islands, they are used to speaking English. So what should you pack? Well, obviously you've got your Euros, sun hat, and ready for the heat. Bear in mind you need to make sure that you've taken into account the dress code of your particular cruise line. 2 other really important things. A lot of the archaeological sites that you visit have uneven and rough surfaces, so make sure that you've got the right sort of footwear, so good, comfortable, solid footwear. And also if you are planning to go to some of the religious sites, so for example you might want to go into some of the churches, they are going to be Greek Orthodox, so fairly conservative, so you have to make sure that things like your shoulders are covered and things like your knees, etc. are covered. So what is the best and easiest way to book a Greek island cruise? There's 3 key ways you can do it. The first, which is by far the simplest and the easiest, is to buy a package. So for example, on my cruise, I went with a company called Titan Travel, and they did a package which included some pre-stay at the lakes in Italy, a transfer to Venice. We then went on the cruise. At the end of the cruise, we were met and had some touring around Athens. They also included a door-to-door service. So they picked me up at home, took me to the airport. Once we got back from our trip, we then had a transfer back home. The second thing you could do if you want a more tailored package is obviously talk to a cruise agent, and they could then put together a package which may include some pre and post days. The third, of course, is you can just go directly to the cruise line and just book the cruise. Certainly, the simplest and easiest way is buying a package. Cruising Greece and the Greek islands is magnificent. There's lots of different ways that you can cruise it. I personally really like the Adriatic combination where you start in Venice or Athens, because it gives you a chance to see the Greek islands plus some of those magnificent places like Kotor and Dubrovnik. I also like going in a smaller ship, so it makes sure it gets me to lots of those iconic and really important places and not just the big regular places, and you'll find you have a much more varied cruising experience. There are lots of things to do, whether you're a beach lover, a history lover, someone who likes shopping. You're going to find lots of things to do, and it really is magnificent. Hope you found that helpful. If you did, I'd love it if you watched many more of my Tips for Travelers videos to help you make much more of your travel time and money.